Hello everyone. Buckle your seatbelts for this one because this is going to be maybe my best show yet, my best Periscope, my best YouTube yet. I'm really excited about this one. So I'll give people a little bit to get in here. In the meantime, today's drink is the Yerba Orange Vanilla Dream. It's yerba mate. I'm not entirely sure what yerba mate is, but it looked good, and so I grabbed it. And let me tell you, it's as good as it looks. It's pretty good. Orange Vanilla Dream. It's like, you know the Stewart's orange cream sodas? It's like if that had a bunch of caffeine. So I love caffeine, so it's pretty good. But yeah, it's pretty good. Yerba. Who's bay? Yerba. Anyway. Okay, let's get on with the show. One more sip of the yerba. Who am I? Yerba. Okay, that's enough. We like to have fun. Okay, anyway, I wanted to talk today about Andrew Yang and Ben Shapiro. If you've heard, Andrew Yang is going to be on the Ben Shapiro show pretty soon here, and I have said that this is probably, I've said to myself, and now I'm going to tell you, this is probably one of the best things that he could have done. And it's the best for his campaign, and it's also probably the best for American society. And we'll get into the reasons why. But the thing that's different from Andrew Yang from other politicians is that his campaign promises and his ideas in the campaign they're rather intellectual ideas, which means that he needs time to set up his premise, he needs time to get into his arguments, he needs time to explain what UBI and the freedom dividend is. And it's really tough to do that on traditional media formats. So it's tough for him to go on MSNBC and explain his whole platform in 6 minutes, just because it's a complicated platform. You need time to set up automation and AI, you need to establish that problem. It takes time to go through Monroe's motivated sequence. If you remember my previous video on how to speak in public, I went over Monroe's motivated sequence, and it takes time to set all this up. So when he goes on MSNBC or CNN or Fox, that's not getting him any new voters. It gets him, more name recognition or more legitimacy, and all of these things may indirectly in the future get him more voters in the future, But where he's going to get the most attention and where he's going to get the most traction and where he's going to get the most new voters is by doing these long-form sorts of shows. And so the big inflection point in his campaign was Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan gave him a whole bunch of hours to talk, so he had as much time as he wanted to talk on the Joe Rogan show. And that's exactly the format where I believe that he does the best in, because then he has time to set up his premise and he has time to explain what the problem is and how he's going to solve it, which is Monroe's motivated sequence. Attention getter, need, satisfaction, visualization, and then action. That's the sequence. So if you're doing a speech in public, that's the sequence you want to go through. Breakfast Club, same deal, right? So he needs to have at least an hour where you can expound on all of his ideas. And he just can't do that 6 minutes on NBC. Maybe the only thing that he could use the corporate press for is, and by corporate press I mean Fox, CNN, MSNBC, etc., NPR, same thing, etc., etc. The only thing that might work for him there is like a CNN town hall where he has time to, they give him an hour of airspace. That might work, but the traditional, phoners, or he's going to show up for, a 5-minute segment, it's just not, that format of the news isn't conducive to expounding on intellectual ideas. So it's really tough to get deep into a subject in 5 minutes. It's just really hard. I don't even know if it's possible. You can't really do it. And the format of the news just, you have to play to the audience, and it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different show. You need to approach it completely differently than you would Joe Rogan. So him going on Ben Shapiro is probably the best thing that he can do, because he has all this time to expound on his ideas. And people have asked me, how do you think the show is going to go? So, with the the real question is Ben Shapiro going to try and own him? Is it going to be Ben Shapiro owns liberal Democratic candidate? Is that going to be what happens? I'm going to make a prediction. 100%, I'm confident of this. It is going to be a great and fantastic conversation. 100%. As I sip my yerba. And if you want an example of this, I saw someone on Twitter link to Ben Shapiro talking to Sam Harris. And I haven't seen that one, but I assume that that's probably a good example. The one that I was looking at was Ben Shapiro talking to Eric Weinstein, not Steen, Weinstein. I think it's Weinstein. I always get it mixed up. But Ben Shapiro talking to Eric Weinstein, and Eric is pretty left. He's definitely not on the right side of the political spectrum. Eric is pretty progressive, pretty liberal, et cetera, et cetera. And those conversations are some of the best conversations that you can listen to, at least for me. I found myself very stimulated. The ideas that they were talking about were fascinating ideas, and they were going deep into the heart of the matter, just trying to parse out all the different complexities and nuances of the subject. Meaning that when Andrew Yang, who is an intellectual type of candidate, goes on a show like Ben Shapiro, I'm expecting that same level of discourse. I'm expecting that they get deep into policy. I'm expecting that they get to actually talk about real ideas and what real solutions look like. And I'm going to predict that Andrew Yang is going to get a lot more fans, maybe voters too, from going on the Ben Shapiro show. And that's really something that's pretty refreshing about his campaign, because no other politician is even entertaining the idea of going on Ben Shapiro's show. Are they? Does any politician even think about going there? Why would they, right? Why would they go on Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin, or why would they talk to Jordan Peterson, or why would they talk to any of these people? There's not much for them to gain, and there's a very high risk that they get called out by engaging in typical, traditional political talk instead of really engaging in the realm of ideas, because that's what politicians do. We talked before about entrepreneurs versus politicians, and politicians like to play it safe, right? They like to see what the public opinion is, and then they react to the public opinion. They aren't people that innovate and create new ideas, because that's a risky move. It's much easier to just match people. What do you think? Okay, that's what I think. It's much easier to do that. And it's a lot more riskier to come up with new ideas, especially if it's not something you're used to doing. Because when you get the inevitable backlash for your new and forward-thinking ideas, what do politicians do? They just crumble. They really do. They're not good at handling bad and negative press. And so for them, going on a show like Ben Shapiro Show or any of these shows, it's really a high-risk, low-reward maneuver, and there's just not much that a traditional politician can get from it, because they're playing defense the entire time, right? They're not there trying to expound new ideas. They're not there trying to, parse out difficult philosophical, political questions. They're there as a politician in most cases. That's just how they're trained. That's what mode they're in when they talk to the press. And, maybe not all, but most of them, that's what's going to be happening. Whereas Andrew Yang doesn't have that same tendency. He's perfectly willing to go and talk about the intellectual side of these arguments, and he's, very happy to talk to pretty much anyone. I mean, his press strategy so far has been what? His press strategy so far has been, I'll talk to anyone who wants to talk to me. And that's a pretty good press strategy. That's the same thing Donald Trump did. Donald Trump talked to everyone who wanted to talk to him. And that's sort of his strategy when it came to foreign policy, too. He talks to Putin, he talks to Kim Jong-un, he talks to everyone. He comes from the New York real estate background where he has to deal with a lot of bad faith actors. So he's going into a lot of these negotiations assuming that the person on the other side isn't acting in good faith. So he's perfectly fine talking to someone, and he knows, how to deal with situations where the other person isn't negotiating in good faith. And, that's why he's always willing to walk away from a deal. And just a quick note on that. People, I see in the comments, sometimes I feel as if they want me to attack the president, or they want me to attack maybe some politician or some idea. And that's not really something I'm too interested in doing. If you notice, a lot of my comments on, the president or Yang or politicians, when I'm talking about them by name, I generally try to talk about the good aspects of the politicians, or, when I'm mentioning them personally by name, or, the president or Yang, I try to talk about the good things and the positive things, because I feel as if both sides of the political spectrum, they do a pretty good job of pointing out the flaws of the other side. And if you ask me, one of the biggest problems we have today in America and in our society is the incredible amount of divisiveness between the two sides. So it's next to impossible for Republicans and Democrats to work together in a bipartisan manner on pretty much anything that matters, right? So if a Republican tries to do something for the Democrats that the Democrats will like, then they're going to get lambasted by their own side. Same thing with the Democrats. If the Democrats try and do something that helps President Trump or the Republicans, they're going to hear about it in the media. And we all know politicians don't like bad press. And so there's a situation going on where anything that's important and is getting media coverage, politicians can't work together on. We see that with North Korea. We see it with the border. There's solutions, and in this case, we know what the solutions are. The experts have done the studies. They've told us what should happen, especially on the border. And we know what needs to happen, but it's impossible to get anything done because the media makes that situation impossible. And that's sort of what I want to talk about, is I think we might be getting to a stage where a new media format is necessary. And I think we might be getting there by necessity. And what I mean by this is the media has set up such a toxic environment for both sides that if a politician wants to do something, it's not necessarily up to them. So if a politician thinks that something is a good idea, that's not something that is the most important thing. What's really the most important determining factor for most politicians is what is going to be the reaction of the press. Because the press has a direct line to the public, and the public, at least a good enough percentage and a good enough portion, trust the media, or they at least listen. They at least are listening to what the media is telling them. Whether they trust the media or not, they're listening. And so the media has this power to frame ideas before we have a chance to encounter them. And if you read the book Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, you'll know that whoever gets to the message first, and corporations know this too, whoever can get to the subject or topic or message first and can frame it, that's going to influence how we perceive that same thing. So, for instance, if you never heard President Trump give a speech, and what you heard about it first was talking media head pundits say that the speech was very dark. Dark is a engineered word, and Scott Adams talks about this, but the word dark is a specially engineered word that is vague enough that it can apply to pretty much anything, but it's specific enough that everything you hear with the framing of dark is going to sound dark. Whereas if you didn't hear that word, if you weren't primed, it's called priming, if you weren't primed with that word beforehand, you would have probably had a much different perception on the event. So the media is able to frame certain events, and they're able to do that because they're very good at what they do. The media, they're very good at framing different messages. And the media has made it so that it's almost impossible for both sides of the political spectrum to come together to do pretty much anything. And we've reached this interesting situation where, we've always worried about corporations controlling our politicians, right? And we've always been worried that corporations, are telling our politicians what to do, and we need to stop that. We need to get money out of politics, et cetera, et cetera. But the situation that we're in now is that corporations do control our politicians. But it's not corporations like ExxonMobil. It's not the energy industry. It's not the pharmaceutical industry. The corporation that controls our politicians is the corporate press. Corporations control our politicians, and it's the corporate press. I haven't heard anyone else frame it like that. I haven't heard anyone else talk about that. There's a corporation that controls our politicians, and it's the press. And people aren't really too happy about it. People are getting, you see the numbers about distrust for the media, and then we also see the rise of news sources on Twitter and alternate news sources and different people. And I wonder what the new model for the press is going to look like. Because there's going to be a paradigm shift, and I think we're in the middle of it right now. I don't know if anyone's really put it like this before, at least I haven't heard it. But it seems to me as if we're going to be moving to a more decentralized system of press. And this is what I was so excited to talk to you about. Instead of having trust in a corporation like CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox, MSNBC, etc., instead of having trust in an organization, we might have to start putting our trust in people instead. People who can have their brand tied to their, let's say, their competency, or people that can have their brand tied to their legitimacy or credibility. So that if a person becomes uncredible, or they're not credible anymore, if that's a word, uncredible, if they become uncredible, the public can drop them. So who are the best interviewers alive today? Because in the past it was, maybe a late night host, maybe it was Letterman or Larry King or something. But who's the best interviewer today? I can only think of two personally. The two best interviewers in the world, one's Joe Rogan. We all know Joe Rogan. And the other one's probably Howard Stern. Howard Stern's fantastic as an interviewer. He's probably maybe the best that's ever lived. And these two people are rather independent people. They call their own shots. And people tune in specifically for them, and specifically for them talking to the other person. So you may not just watch any Johnny Depp, interview. You won't watch Johnny Depp on E, but you would watch Johnny Depp if he was talking to Joe Rogan. And if you're a Howard Stern person, you would listen to Johnny Depp talk to Howard Stern. Pick any celebrity, pick any person. And even if you don't know who the person is, if Joe Rogan's talking to him, it's probably worth watching. It's worth at least checking out to see what it's all about. It'll at least be a fun time. When we talk about journalists, we might have to start moving to a model of a decentralized model where we're trusting more in the journalist and a freelance journalist than we are any specific organization. So it might be that we might just be better off donating, doing a Patreon, giving money to someone like Ben Anderson from Vice, who's going over and doing these war documentaries and these incredible documentaries. You probably saw the one he was just on Joe Rogan. And I've been a big Ben Anderson fan for a while. I mean, what Vice does, whether you like them or hate them, what Vice does as far as international coverage and getting journalists on the ground they're the only ones that do it as far as I'm concerned. But it's marred by all their other stuff that's going on. The Vice organization itself is a big organization, and any message that comes through could be tainted. So instead of having the situation where I won't even get into it. The big point is having independent journalists might be the way forward. You might have a Brandon Darby this is the point. Ben Anderson works for Vice. But if you don't like Vice, you're not going to watch Ben Anderson, even though Ben Anderson is completely separate from the political machine that is Vice. Brandon Darby, one of the best people on the border for, immigration and the U.S.-Mexico border. Brandon Darby is one of the best that I've seen covering that issue. He works for Breitbart, and Breitbart's international section is something that's completely different from their political coverage. How many people make that distinction? Not many. Wouldn't it be better just to give money to Brandon Darby himself and trust the brand and the person and the whole package that is the independent Brandon Darby? Wouldn't it be better if we started to trust in individual people and individual journalists and then supported them ourselves instead of relying on a corporation to send out people and then filter that information that they get and then they disseminate it to us? Because corporations, the corporate model of the press is that you have to keep making more and more, extreme claims in order to get views. It's in their direct financial and monetary interest to have extreme, outrageous claims. It's the term clickbait. That's what the corporate press does, is that they'll put out headlines that they know are going to generate a lot of clicks, and they'll have a story that's constructed and written for a certain audience. So CNN, they're not interested in having Republican viewers. They don't really care about that. What they're interested in is having a very motivated and very energized Democratic base, or let's call them partisan base. They know who's watching their channel, and they custom fit their channel to their viewers. Because if they don't, those viewers are going somewhere else. So the corporate model of the press necessitates them tailoring their message to a certain person, because they're a corporation, and corporations have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. Whereas an individual doesn't necessarily have that same sort of problem, because individuals can have enough money. They can say, I have enough money, I don't really care about custom tailoring my message to spin it a certain way. I can just do whatever it is that I feel is right. I can do whatever I feel like. And people can either respond positively or negatively to that. And so individuals have a lot more freedom than corporations do. And that freedom comes with a lot of responsibility, but that freedom also comes with the ability to truth tell. So individuals have this freedom and ability that corporations do not have. Switching to a more individualistic and decentralized press model might be the way that we get around this divisiveness issue in America. Because again, as I've said, divisiveness is one of the biggest problems in America. And you're not going to get around this divisiveness issue by having the corporate press continue to battle it out. Something has to change with that model. And the only thing that I can think of, and I think the way that we're moving towards, is by having individuals trusting more in individuals than we do in corporations. So I hope that makes sense. But we are just about at the 20-minute mark, and I think we're a little bit past it. But before I wrap up, this might be the last Periscope. I don't know. We might do one more, but I'm thinking about migrating over to Twitch, because I see that not many people on Twitch are doing political analysis. In fact, I haven't seen any. So maybe it's a niche that I found that we can try and carve out, and we can do stuff on Twitch, and we can have still great engagement with the chat, and we'll see how that works. But I have a webcam coming in, one that was recommended by Twitch people, so we'll see how that goes, and the audio quality will come up. And the big thing with Twitch, and the reason why I might move over, and why it's looking likely, is because then I can show you a video clip, or we can live stream and watch a debate together, and we can analyze it live. And if there's a clip of TV or The Daily Show or whatever, we can listen to it and watch it live, and then we can interact and talk about it. And I think that would be a lot of fun. That sounds exciting to me, and I would love to talk to you guys and show you exactly what it is that I'm talking about, especially when it's something visual, like Andrew Yang on The Breakfast Club talking about, what was it? Revenue Day, yeah. And how Charlemagne freaked out about that. Like, I would love to show you that and then react live, like PewDiePie or something. And, PewDiePie, he's doing something right. He's been #1 for a while. So anyway, I don't know if this will be the last one. We might do one more Friday or Saturday, but the webcam, whenever that comes in, we're going to try and get Twitch started, and we're going to iterate and improve on the podcast. Or I don't know if this is a podcast. It's a show. And then maybe on Twitch we can start doing interviews too. But there's a lot of cool things planned, and we'll see how that goes. So anyway, thanks for sticking around all this time. Let's have one more sip of our yerba, because you're my bae. Anyway, I will see you guys all later. Bye-bye.